Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. Happy Tuesday. Lindsay, how are you doing?
It is a happy Tuesday. I'm excited to hear what you want to talk about. I know it's probably not the Met Gala, which is what I was watching all night last night.
Oh, really? Was that on again?
Yeah, that thing was on.
I saw some photos on X and all that sort of thing.
I'm sure you loved all the looks, but
Was there a theme this year?
Yeah, it was copying off the dandy culture. Mind you, I'm not the fashion.
Dandy culture?
I don't even know
what that
going
means.
On a rant, it's going to be too long to explain. Please, you tell me what's on your radar. Maybe we'll get to that later.
Okay, maybe we'll circle back. Anyway, the 2025 Pulitzer Prizes were awarded yesterday, with several mainstream news outlets winning multiple awards for their journalism. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post were among the big winners. Now look, despite my criticisms of the mainstream media, it is true that mainstream liberal and progressive journalists often do good work. For instance, one of the New York Times winning articles was an in-depth look at how the U.S. government's support for torturers and murderers in Afghanistan helped make the civilian population more favorably disposed toward the Taliban, undermining the U.S.'s diplomatic position. That was great reporting, and it's true, and the Times deserves credit for reporting and publishing it. But looking over the list of winning articles, I'm struck by what's missing. There is not a single winner that focuses on President Joe Biden's cognitive decline. In fact, there's not a single article about the Biden presidency at all among the winners. Was it not one of the biggest stories of 2024, however, that the sitting president could only take meetings in the middle part of the day, would have trouble focusing if he had to talk for too long, needed instructions on where specifically to walk when visiting unfamiliar territory, and despite all that, was still running for re-election? Nobody did any journalism on that front that was worth reporting, that was worth awarding. Now you could read this fact two ways, of course. The Pulitzer Prize Board perhaps was overlooking good reporting on Biden's cognitive decline because of its own bias, or perhaps there wasn't enough good journalism on this subject for the board to evaluate because everybody ignored it. Neither thought is particularly comforting to me. Now, I know I've really harped on this point lately. Maybe you're all getting sick of hearing about it, but it seems worth repeating to me over and over again. Joe Biden, who had the most important job in the world and was seeking the American public's endorsement to continue in this job for another 4 years, was too old, too frail, mentally unfit for the job. His inner circle participated in a vast conspiracy to cover up this truth. There's really never been anything quite like it in American history since, I guess, FDR's confinement to a wheelchair was kept a secret by his officials and also, in that case, the press. It's kind of a story that I would have thought today's scoop-seeking, intensely negative media would be dying to get their hands on, but they abjectly failed to cover it, with a few exceptions. So here we are. There's no coverage worthy of a Pulitzer on this front. Now, I wasn't exactly comforted by these comments from prize administrator Marjorie Miller, who says that critics of the mainstream media are attempting to silence journalists and prevent them from doing their jobs. Watch this.
These are particularly difficult times for the media and publishers in the United States, atop years of severe financial pressures and layoffs, amid the dangers of covering wars and natural disasters. Journalists and writers now face additional threats in the form of legal harassment, the banning of books, and attacks on their work and legitimacy.
It's true that the current president is going to war with the media, and he should not be suing or regulating mainstream news organizations. Not all criticism is a form of censorship, however. When conservatives and libertarians criticize the press for how they cover certain stories or for missing other stories altogether, we're not trying to make the mainstream media disappear. We are encouraging them to do their jobs better. By all means, I hope mainstream news organizations keep covering Trump and covering him negatively when it's called for. I've been unsparing in my criticisms of Trump's economic plans lately. I'm not asking for journalists to go easy on Trump. I'm asking for them to not go easy on Biden, or whichever Democrat is on deck, because realistically the Biden era is thankfully over. That's the way mainstream media can earn back the trust of all Americans. Or, as the saying goes, keep playing stupid games and winning stupid prizes.
That's one of my favorite sayings. It doesn't apply here at all, but I like it.
Yeah, they're not stupid prizes, and there's good journalism done, but
no, I
searched. First I Control F Biden name, no Biden. Okay, then I read every single one, nothing.
So you know how these go, right? These are subjective people who are esteemed in their careers combing through thousands of submissions. So I think that it's not about there being a lack of stories. I think it's more about none of them actually being Pulitzer Prize worthy. And we have to differentiate. It's okay that some of the reporting that I saw on CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, especially around that July area, after we saw what was different than his press team was telling us, that he was healthy and fine. We saw with our eyes, but we also cannot judge based on looks if somebody can lead. We have to go based off what their cognitive ability is. And then we watched that debate and we understood it way more. And that's when you saw a lot more reporting. But just because they didn't win the prize doesn't mean that it wasn't fair and accurate and covering what information journalists had at the moment.
But how is it the case that they weren't able to get better information earlier? Journalists have sources embedded in the administration. You can read, yesterday, for instance, we covered some of the turmoil in John Fetterman's office. I thought a lot of it was unfair, but this is reporting from a mainstream news source, interviews with former staffers about what's going on. Again, I thought it was kind of unfair, but they're able to get information about, looks at what's going on in offices in Washington, and they didn't do that for Biden.
But
until we all knew.
But even like yesterday's reporting on Fetterman, does that deserve a Pulitzer Prize? Like, even if they had done that, I think people were just trying to follow the election cycle. There was a lot going on. So the things that did win were like the beautiful photos that we saw when Trump resiliently made it out of that assassination attempt for the New York Times.
That was great work. They deserved that.
They deserved this.
I'm not saying the
reporting
winners
on
don't.
International, horrendous situations in Sudan. So I think when you just level the playing field and say what was actually in the article, okay, Biden was old. Right? Yeah. He passed the torch to Kamala. But did he do something so egregious?
Well, after they forced him to.
Well, and you talk about...
he did not go gently into that good night.
Right, so Biden's team calculated or miscalculated a major mistake on my end. Like you said, you could be balanced in the way you look at it. I think they could have handled that way better, right? And gave either Kamala a good runway or made the decision years in advance to not run again.
I'm just thrown that we didn't get better reporting on how bad Biden had gotten earlier, prior to it being exposed for everyone at the debate. And then the other thing I wanted to mention here about the Pulitzers, I am seeing, while most of the journalists who won, I think did pretty good work, conservatives are picking at one of the winners, which was on abortion-related restrictions and how they had contributed this was what was reported contributed to someone's death. I saw a lot of conservatives saying that was not a fair characterization of that story. Hoping to get someone on the show who can maybe speak to that perspective, and we'll find out more about it because this is not my area of interest. But that was the other thing I saw criticized about the Pulitzers.
And always with awards, remember, like even though it might be judged by some esteemed colleagues in journalism, it still is subjective. It's not just, it's about opinion based on what they consider the highest standards of reporting or went in more detail. And so it's never going to be like, just all people agree this was literally the best reporting of the year. There was so much to cover in pictures and in writing. So I think it's hard.
It is subjective, but again, there's not a single story about, was it not a big story of last year? I still can't get over it. Maybe I'm the only one this obsessed with how Biden was preparing to be president for another 4 years.
But if they were all stories about how well Biden was doing or how bad Trump was doing, like barely any of the stories talked about the nuanced details about some of the things Trump was saying and doing that were a bit outrageous on the campaign trail, right? So it's not like we got a bunch of stories that were quote unquote biased.
Oh, but you don't think in the 2026 awards there's going to be any awards for anti-Trump stories from his first year in office?
I can't predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball.
I can predict the future, Lindsay. I'm reading my crystal ball. I predict there will in fact be some anti-Trump reporting winning awards, and again, they might very well deserve them. I'm not enthusiastic about everything this administration is doing. It's not that you got to go softer on Trump. You just got to go just as hard against the other guys. And our perception, my perception as a libertarian, a contrarian, the right of center perspective is that they didn't go as hard because they worried that they would help bring about Trump returning to office. And now Trump's in office anyway, and nobody trusts the mainstream media.
Well, I'm going to have to check in 2026 because we can't predict the future, so we'll just see.
We'll
but
see.
Trump does have a one-way ticket out of America and a cash offer for illegal migrants. But how many are going to take it? That's next.